Sisiphelokazi is in.
Yeah.
Stop.
The lighting is terrible here.
Oh, thanks God. Singaphakathi. So,
Yeah.
Doc,
Yeah.
ngicela ungeneke nawe. Yo.
Injani lighting lapho Themba? I'm
Ngicela
not
ungene
sure.
Doc nge-meeting yakho. Manje wona Doc mina sengiyi-host wena soyi-co-host.
Themba? Themba, can you hear me?
Wena Doc manje. We are a co-host.
Themba?
You join. You
Themba?
open Zoom and then you join.
Themba? Themba?
Yebo. ISIS. Slindu Doc.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yebo. I can.
All right, can I go in?
Yes, just press join Doc.
Yeah, I have.
Then mase join then ufake i-ID yakho.
I have. I've done all of that.
Ya kade sikubona la waphinde wanyamalala.
I'm in. Yebo.
Sesiyakubona manje.
Guys, we're live now.
Yeah, also khona. So we are a co-host and a host.
Sure.
Yeah, I can see. Then you can start. Then you can share.
All right. Apologies for the delays. The technology was not working with us. I'm not sure what to make of that. But anyway, we've managed to sort it out. We are just 2 minutes late. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Joining us via various social media channels on Facebook, on YouTube, and also on the Dr. Fundi channel. My name is Dr. Fundi Lenyati. Welcome to my channel, which was unveiled about 3 weeks ago, coinciding with the lockdown in South Africa. And the purpose of this channel is really to facilitate conversations and to share information on matters that are of interest within the healthcare space. Now, as a family physician, I subscribe to the holistic definition of health, which is biopsychosocial spiritual definition of health. So over the last 16 days, we have focused on a number of issues relating to COVID-19, from a physical aspect, from a psychological aspect, from a social aspect. And I thought today it's about time that we also focus on the area that is quite neglected, yet very important, the area of spiritual health. So our topic today is spiritual reflections and lessons for humanity in the context of a COVID-19 pandemic. Now, before I go deeper, into the topic and introduce, I need to introduce my guest today. My guest today is Phelokazi Nyati. She is my little sister. I still have to call her little sister. She is my little sister. She was born 11 months after I was born. So we're almost twin. Somebody gave me a term called Irish twins. I'm not sure, it's a new term that I picked up. But anyway, so when I was 11 months old, she was born. And so I had to be moved from breastfeeding to take care so that she can be the one, who gets that benefit. So maybe that explains why I'm a bit of an extrovert and attention seeker sometimes, because I didn't get enough of that. But anyway, now both our parents were teachers. And one of the things that they taught us was that when you are going to talk on any subject, it's very, very important that you define clearly what you are going to talk about. So I am going to define just two things. Well, the topic is about spirituality. Now, there tends to be confusion sometimes around spirituality versus religion. So I will start by just defining spirituality. Then after that, I will introduce my guest properly. So spirituality is a broad concept with room for many perspectives. It includes a sense of connection to something bigger than ourselves, a higher power. It typically involves a search for meaning in life. As such, it is a universal human experience, something that touches us all. People may describe it as spirituality as experiences that are sacred or transcendent, or simply a deep sense of aliveness and interconnectedness. Some may find that their spiritual life is intricately linked to their association with a church, a temple, a mosque, or a synagogue. Others may pray or find comfort in personal relationship with God or a higher power. Still others, they seek meaning through their connections to nature or art. All right, so that was about spirituality. But now we need to also say, what is religion? Religion is shared connections of transcendental beliefs that have been passed from believers to converts that are held by adherents to be actively meaningful and serious, and they are either based on formally documented doctrines, that is what we call organized religion, or established cultural practices, and that's where we talk about folk religion. Now, in South Africa, our constitution actually accords both culture and religion equal recognition and protection. And clause 9.3 of the constitution prohibits the state from unfairly discriminating versus anyone of the following grounds: religion, conscience, belief, and culture. So we are in a country that promotes diversity in culture, in religion, and any discrimination along those lines is not necessarily, in fact, it's not allowed. But having said that, in practice, some religions are actually more privileged than others. We have not got to a point where everyone is actually treated equally. But let me leave it at that point. So my guest today, Ms. Pelokazi Nyati, she is a qualified physiotherapist. But also, she is a holistic healer. She has done various disciplines of healing, from the indigenous knowledge systems type of healing to other forms of healing. She is also a qualified spiritual coach. She's also a qualified coach. So I won't waste time. I'll explain other things a little bit later. So Pelokazi, welcome to Dr. Fundi platform.
Thank you so much. And it's a great privilege to share this platform with you. Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
And
now,
I would like to say good evening to all your viewers that are in the South, and to all the other viewers from other continents. I would like to say good day.
All right. Now, I decided not to, tell everything about yourself in terms of your skills, and I would like you to do that yourself. So can you just briefly tell our viewers your broad spiritual, knowledge and skills and insights, so that before we get to the topic of the day, at least they have an idea of why I invited you, not because you're my sister, but because you bring a wealth of spiritual knowledge.
Okay, thank you. Look, you've done a great job in terms of saying who I am, in terms of my acquired knowledge. I was born in Xaza, in the Eastern Cape, and I was raised in Tabase, a village in Mthatha. But in terms of my upbringing, we were brought up in a Christian family, and for all my life, that's what I've known. I was trained as a physiotherapist and qualified as a physiotherapist in 1989 at Medunsa, and then practiced as a physio. But over and above that, my curiosity, or rather my spirit, led me to finding more about myself, which led me to processes that would be processes of self-actualization, processes of personal transformation, processes that would lead me to understand who I am in the bigger context of my life on the planet. And I have been for the longest time in a quest to find out what my role is in the greater humanity. And so I've been on that path for almost 18 years now. And then over and above that, I realized as I went, through my spiritual path, that there is something more to me in terms of my calling, my spiritual calling. And so as part of the training that I received, Indigenous knowledge systems indeed were part of that. That would include the gift of prophecy, which is something that I got trained and guided in. I also got trained in the field of what other people call psychic mediumship. So it's on the side of spiritual guidance, but mostly led by what one calls divine guidance and angel healing. So as a holistic healer, one of the areas that I felt I was lacking in, as people were coming to me and seeking answers a lot of times, is that I didn't know how to approach some of the things that they came with. And so I went and did a bit of training in intuitive coaching, what people call inner life skills coaching, where you go within to find the inner life skills that you're born with. And further, I went and did NLP coaching, which is neuro-linguistic programming. So I'm a practitioner in neuro-linguistic programming and the coaching thereof. I also did timeline therapy, which was, well, a training that I received as part of the NLP coaching. I did mindfulness, which is an old Eastern type of belief. Mindfulness is a Buddhist practice, which has been adopted in both coaching and in psychology and in many other fields. So those are broadly the areas that I got training in. So I'm not going to go deep into that because then we'll lose track of time. So I'll leave it there for now.
Okay. Now, before you go in, I just want to read this poem because it talks about why we are talking here today. It's a poem from John Mark Green. It's called Poem for a Pandemic. Our carefully crafted illusion of predictable security destroyed by a simple virus. We watch as the well-oiled gears of our elaborate world machine grind to a shuddering halt. An invisible enemy illuminates hidden lines of our interdependence. Eerie silence prowls empty streets, and forced isolation teaching us just how much we need each other. another one by Richard Rohr. We are in the midst of a highly teachable moment. There is no doubt that this period will be referred to for the rest of our lifetimes. We have a chance to go deep and to go broad. Globally, we are in this together. Depth is being forced on us by great suffering, which, as I like to say, always leads to great love. Now, I'm using these two quotations to zoom in to say, we are told that it's about enforcing interdependence, yeah, amongst us as human beings, to show that we actually need each other. We are told that this is the teachable moment. Now, I want to then hear from you, Pelosi. What do you make from a spiritual angle? What do you make of the situation we are in as humanity? If indeed this is the teachable moment, what do you make from your spiritual insights?
I am so taken aback by the poems we've just read, because they show the yin and the yang of how we view life, you know, the negative pole and the positive pole of how we think about life. And I so relate to everything that has been said. From a physical perspective, there is the need to survive. That is the reaction that we have to anything that looks like a disaster in our lives. That is the reaction that we'll give. However, a lot of times we're reacting in a way that we've been programmed to react to things. We react to life and we never really look at what do we have which we can take from ourselves, which doesn't need a teacher from outside. A lot of times we look to the outside for help, for guidance. However, what I've learned is that as spiritual beings, we're born with a certain wisdom. There's a certain wisdom that we continue to have for as long as we exist. That wisdom is the wisdom that is connected to the higher power you spoke about, which is God. It doesn't matter what you refer to him as. You can refer to him as Ukamata, you can refer to him as Allah, you can refer to him as Yahweh, you can refer to him as Utiko, Unkulunkulu, Mudimu, you can refer to him in whatever way. However, this is a force that we constantly connected with. Now the question is, at this moment, what is it that could have gone wrong or that we could have done wrong as humanity for this to be brought upon us? Because that is how we look at life. Generally, something goes wrong, it's because I've done something wrong, I'm being punished. Yes, when you go into the religious belief systems of various religions, you find that whenever there has been either what people perceive as a punishment, it is seen as we have wronged God, so we need to go back and find out what it is that we've done wrong. As a collective, we need to understand this is something that hits everyone across the board, regardless of the geographical location, regardless of whether you're rich or poor, regardless of your religion, regardless of your belief system. And it hits across the board. And therefore, it means that there is something that we have in common that we need to look at, and that is we need to slow down. We need to take a moment and reflect as humanity. We need to take a moment and say, what is it that we are not getting about the way that we're conducting ourselves? If indeed we're looking at this as something that maybe God is punishing us for, what is it that we have done? Now, if you look at humanity and you look at the various disciplines or various religions, yes, you will talk of that. However, within the African belief system, there is also something called Ingqumbo Yeminyanya. Now, if one looks at everything in totality and you look at both belief systems, if you look at what we would call Ingqumbo Yeminyanya and you look at maybe God's wrath upon humanity, you then look at what it is that we are doing to this point that has made God to decide that he's gonna put a halt to everything so that we can sit and reflect. So if you look at, for example, I am a prophet, But if you look at what prophets are doing today, which I don't think is something that they were sent to do, if you look at what they're doing today, we're doing things for self-benefit. We're looking at what am I going to benefit from everything that I am preaching to people, I'm saying to people. We look at what is it that I can destroy on the one side so that I can gain. When you talk of religions, you look at religions today and you find that religions are divisive. Is that what God wants? I don't think so, because I believe that we are all one. As humanity, the reason why this is striking us across the board, it's to prove that there is no divide. We might think that the ocean is going to divide us, but look, this thing is seen to have started in China, but look where it is today. It's around the world, meaning that we continue to be connected. In the poem, you spoke about something that I really like talking about, which is the connectedness or the interdependence of humanity. This is something that we have drifted away from as a collective. We tend to look at things that will benefit individuals. So I'm doing things for myself, for my. However, I'm not looking at the fact that maybe the reason why I was even born was for me to be of service to the greater humanity. I only look at what I can do to enrich myself, to empower myself, but I don't look at the next person. And so everything came to a ground halt. I believe the reason why everything came to a ground halt is for us to then say, now the friends have been removed away from me. The parties have been removed away from me. The clubbing has been removed away from me. Work has been removed away from me. My colleagues are no longer with me because they are in their homes. I am isolated with my immediate family. And then I ask myself, why now? Now, if you look at all the religious calendars, you'll find that this is a sacred, or this is a very sacred moment for most of the religions. I'll make an example with Christianity. It is Ipasika, it is Easter. Now, why at Easter weekend, when we always go and gather as a community for communion, why at this time are we being forced to stay away from one another? Maybe it is important for us to reflect and find that a lot of times we ignore the fact that we do have what we always waiting for from the outside. Maybe we needed to start looking at that, our close connection with our God. Are we undermining our relationship, our intimate relationship with our God? Each individual. We're being called as individual to look within and stop looking on the outside for solutions, because often we'll look at our leaders, our spiritual leaders, our religious leaders for answers. But we ignore the fact that there's that wisdom that resides within, there's that spirit that we are. And that spirit is the one that should then lead us. We should listen to the not diluted messages, but to authentic messages. If you go within, a lot of times we pray. Prayer is about what? It's a reaction to something that is uncomfortable. It's about asking for something. It's about bargaining with God. But right now, maybe the call is for us to be still. It is a call for us to reflect. It is a call for us to go within and listen. What do? We practice things like mindfulness, where you are aware of your own emotions. You are aware of what's happening around you. You are aware of what's happening to the people that you know and people you do not know, people you never even thought you would think about, people that are suffering in other parts of the world. You look at that and you say, what is it that I can do to shift how things are happening in the world, instead of sitting here and reacting to what is happening? So in essence, what I'm saying is that we need to then be still. We need to reflect. We need to meditate, because in meditation, it's not like prayer. We're talking all the time, but now in meditation, you sit still and you listen and you find that voice that's going to talk to you. Whether you call it God's voice, or you're talking about angels, you're talking about amadlozi, whatever voice that you listen to that's going to direct you, it needs to talk to you in a way that's going to make you shift. It's going to make you change from what you were, reset, and start to do things differently. Acknowledge that you don't exist only for yourself, but you're existing for the benefit of the greater humanity. I don't know if I've answered your question, but
Yes, you've said a mouthful, but then you almost saying there's something that humanity has done wrong, and we are being dragged, kicking and screaming, to actually finding out who we are and what do we need to do differently. Now, we are locked in our homes, because of the lockdown.
Yes.
What should we be doing? Yes, you said we must meditate, we must pray, but a lot of people are anxious. A lot of people are fearful. A lot of people are losing hope. Every day we're hearing of people dying.
Yes.
So for me, so from a spiritual angle, because I almost feel like now we're being accused of having done something, but not all of us maybe we're doing things that may not be approved of. So, but yes, you talked about the collective. So for me, can you just try and just unpack, using examples from different spiritual angles?
Okay, right. If for example, I made an example of Easter, all right? If you're looking at Easter and what it represents Christ dying and then raising from the dead, all right?
Yeah.
And in essence, if you have to go back to the basics, that's what it means. But a lot of times, this lesson, we miss it because we think it's about him only. We forget that we have a responsibility as well. We have a responsibility to say, we need to die at a certain level and rise at a certain level. You cannot be the same person when you've gone through such a spiritual process of understanding a path that is that difficult. Remember, he had a cross that he carried. We each have crosses that we carry. That is from the Christian perspective. Secondly, we go and we share with strangers. I'll call them strangers for now. We go and we share and we sit there in communion with strangers, but we forget to do the very things at home. You're not focusing at the people that you live with at home. Now you're forced to sit down and say, the scriptures that I dissect with everyone out there, shouldn't I be starting here at home? The hope that I'm giving to other people out there, shouldn't I be starting to raise that hope here at home? When I pray and I pray for other people, shouldn't I be praying with my family and for my family? And together we pray for others that we know and those that we don't know. Shouldn't we be doing that? That's one. Two, when you talk of as a collective, yes, as a collective, we have done wrong. I will tell you what I mean by that. When I say as a collective, we've done wrong, how many times have we encouraged discrimination against others? How many times have we turned a back to somebody that needs us? How many times have we become ignorant where we need to open our eyes and change? How many times have we done things because we know those are the things that have worked for us? How many times have we chosen to walk away from what we know for the betterment of self and humankind? So we need to ask ourselves those questions. When I went to the students of many religions that have written articles during this time, there is a collective message that says we need to sit down and reflect. We need individually to take that message of hope and not leave it with just ourselves, but spread that message. Now, if we have to make choices, we need to make choices the same way that we make choices with the food that we eat, what we feed our physical beings. We need to make those choices so that we can have a healthy mind and a healthy spirit. What does that mean? It means the same way that I'm going to say, I'm not going to eat too many sugary things now at this time. I'm going to be exercising. But what are we doing to nurture our spirits? What are we doing to train our spirits? Because a lot of people will say, Mina, I do meditate, I do pray. But in reality, maybe a person prays once a month. but they don't have that practice that's going to bring a connection to that spirit self, the higher self, and the higher being that holds you in place every single time. And so maybe those are the things we need to do. We need to train ourselves to not listen to negativity, to start sifting good from bad and things that are going to be destructive to us. We need to start moving away from that. There's a lot of stuff that's in the media right now. If one had to make a choice between going on social media and walking away from social media and going to read things that are going to build you, trust me, it's easier to go to social media because it's easy information, it's readily available. But when it means that we have to train ourselves to do something that we can consistently do to uplift ourselves, we rarely ever do that. So what I'm talking about here is a situation where we start by going to the things that we do from day to day and making changes there. If, for example, you listen to the media, the things that you hear, if, for example, today you hear that there's 2,000 cases that have been diagnosed, a lot of people, the next thing they're going to wait for is how many died? Have we asked ourselves how many have recovered? How many of those cases that were in isolation, that probably didn't receive hospitalization, have recovered? Because that way we're looking at positive. We twist the news that we see, and we see them not through the lens that we are expected to see it, but we see it in reality. We break things down into every single aspect of what we feed ourselves, starting with those little changes. The next thing is that then when you do things and you reach out to other people. Believe you me, when you do something good for a person, you feel better, it uplifts you as well. As a society, we rarely ever do that. We want things that are going to be done for us, but we rarely ever say, I need to offer myself to serve other people. That uplifts you. That uplifts your spirit when you are able to give something to somebody that needs something from you. And when that person gets better, you find that you also get uplifted. So we need to start looking at ourselves as that interconnected humanity and not just as individuals, as self. But we need to take what we've got within and start giving it to others. The love that we need. You know, people need to start being more, they need to start being more conscious of what's happening around them, to the communities that they are in. They need to start being conscious of that and start taking action. And we need to also be supportive of the ones close to us and the ones that are far and distant.
So I hear you. You've made examples from maybe a Christian perspective.
Yes.
You mentioned earlier that you got trained in indigenous knowledge systems. That includes African spirituality. Now, from that angle, what do you make of where we are?
It is sad to see the indigenous knowledge system practitioners, the things they do, because when somebody is called or somebody has got a calling, what we call a spiritual calling, whether you call it spiritual or you call it a calling by your ancestors or the ancestral calling, when somebody is called, it is a gift that is God-given. You're given a gift to be a healer. That's number one. But you look at what some of our practitioners are doing. We're doing the opposite of what we are supposed to do. Where you are supposed to heal, you find that people kill. People are always in the quest to get money, you know? I can do anything if somebody's gonna pay me R1 million, but I don't look at what it is that I'm doing to the next person. If somebody says, get rid of that person, people don't think twice. They go, they kill, meaning that you're not doing what you are supposed to be doing. So spiritually, that misaligns you to your own spiritual guidance, the things that people do. And I'm talking purely from an indigenous perspective, because we need to correct the wrongs that we are doing as a collective and as certain groups in society.
But I hear you talking about people who may be, malpractice. But my interest is more around in the belief system. You've got the higher power, you've got the middlemen, I'll call them the ancestors, and then you've got people here on earth. What is happening there, to make sense of what we are experiencing here on earth?
Well, the first thing that we need to acknowledge is that the ancestors are not God, Fundi.
Yeah.
Ancestors are not God. God is the supreme being.
Agreed.
God is the one that has got the power over us. And then the ancestors, you call them intermediaries, you call them the invisibles. Those are like angels to us that have been in our bloodlines. Those are those people that guide us when there's things that are not going right. More often than not, we don't listen when we get guidance. We take certain things for granted, or we undermine certain messages that we get until it comes to a point where there's a rude awakening, where you need to snap out of whatever way that you've been conducting your life in. So when you need to snap out of it, as I mentioned previously, I mentioned ingqumbo. We're moving away from who we are. And when we move away from who we are, some of the things that are good about us, about being African, we're walking away from them. Some of the things that are going to make us become better people are the very things that we're moving away from. And so because of that, kuba khona ingqumbo. And that ingqumbo is not something that you can just say, wait a minute, I'll take care of you tomorrow. It is something that forces you to sit down and listen and change, because it is change that is required from us, because we've walked away from a whole lot of things that have made us who we are.
And that is the whole world you're talking
Look,
about.
it's gonna, remember every single society is connected. We're interconnected. We're given certain things that we can use to relate to spirit. Diverse as they are, whether you call them angels or you talk about amadlozi, whatever that you're talking about, there is so many intermediaries that are there. There is God, and there's so many of those intermediaries. A lot of times when we get messages, when we get instructions to do certain things in a certain way, we ignore those. And when it's time to then, to shift, now it becomes painful, because the lessons don't come easy. Remember, everything that happens to us is not really to make us feel pain. Though we will feel pain as physical beings, it is meant for us to look at what is the lesson for us as humanity, as greater humanity. Now, each region will look at things and find things that are unique to it, but there's certain things that are a collective. So I want us to say, yes, there are things that are uniform across the board, but there's certain things that are unique to the African way, that are unique to our continent, even to the way that we responded to this.
All right. So we take it away then from Christianity and African, belief systems, but there's many other, spiritualities or religions across the world.
You see, there's
any insights from that side?
There's a scholar of the Judaic religion, of Judaism, Rabbi Bregman from the US. There's something that he said, or he wrote about just last week, where he said, God does everything for the ultimate good of humanity, and everything that he does has meaning. And then he says, something can be good for you, but it might not necessarily be comfortable. Meaning that when you need to change doesn't come nicely. It comes with a bit of pain. It comes with a bit of letting go. And he says, God will sometimes make use of natural phenomena and current events to get our attention, especially when we are asleep at the wheel of life. Meaning that where we're supposed to be at the wheel of our own lives, where we're misconducting ourselves at the wheel, he then will use that. So he says the natural phenomenon, because he sees this as a natural phenomenon, And he sees this as something that would then make us to move away from how we've been doing things. And it's going to force us to reflect, to introspect, and to improve as human beings. And this is for the benefit of greater humanity.
Any other insights from yeah?
So he also talks about the fact that it's coinciding with Passover for the Judaic religion. And he says, similar to the plague of darkness, where everyone was stuck in their homes and frozen in place, we need to look at our own deeds, our missteps, and many are given a chance to now look in the mirror. So we need to now look in the mirror and say, what is it that we're not doing right? Maybe we are polluting one another. And that's why we need to be in individual isolation so that I can reflect on what I've been doing as an individual. So that is from this scholar of the Judaic religion.
Yeah. Any other scholars from other spiritual, dimensions?
Yes. On the side of Buddhism, one of the, again, like I'm saying, I'm looking at what the scholars of each of the religions has contributed into the mainstream media. So one of the scholars of Buddhism said, we need to acknowledge the fear, the uncertainty as part of ordinary life and make peace with our reality. He then says we need to practice mindfulness and meditation and create awareness on the safety of self and the safety of others. He then talks about this interconnectedness, whereby when you take care of your own safety, you're also protecting others, meaning that you also develop a certain level of empathy towards others because you know that you are going to affect others in many other ways. And just by a pure act of washing your hands, you might find that you're protecting a life. And then he said, we need to use this time to reflect. Now, there is a consistency, as I said, in all of these religions. He says we need to use this time to reflect and change the perspective of the world. So I'm talking now about Buddhism, but if you go again to the Islamic religions, again here, one of the scholars of Islamic religion, what he said we need to avoid causing harm towards others. This disease is something that can harm others. It does harm others, but it's all within ourselves to understand that we need to protect other people. As we protect ourselves, let us not be selfish. Let us not be selfish and protect those that we know and those that we do not know. And he says we need to trust. He uses Allah, and that is God. We need to trust in Allah, but also adhere to the medicines that we have been advised to use for the various ailments that we suffer from. He talks about preservation of life and emphasis on cleanliness and eating of pure foods, which is the practice of the Islamic religion.
Yeah. All right. Now, there's something that
I was going to talk about what Hinduism speaks about as well. Again, for the Hindu people, this is also a sacred period. All right.
Yeah.
These for them, what they've said is that they said the same thing. We need to reflect, we need to change, we need to shift. And they said the prayers that are observed and the celebrations that used to be observed in congregations then are going to be things that we need to do in our own homes, but we need to also keep that virtual connection. The reason for that is that there's people that are losing hope. And maybe by reaching out to somebody else using the available lines of virtual connections, you might be uplifting somebody that might be losing hope somewhere, and encourage a sense of community, which is continuing to commune with the divine. And one of the leaders said, for everyone and everything, life was on a fast forward. Moving at that pace, you do not have time to stop and actually listen, which contributes to the polarization of the world that we created as people. This is like, hey guys, you need to slow down. So that is the message that this particular scholar spoke about.
All right. Now, I want us to go back to the African spirituality, because I don't want to leave an impression that we we talked negatively about that because you highlighted the issue about people who are involved in malpractice. But I think there's more good about African spirituality than just that. And I don't want to leave that kind of message, on people. So can you look at it now? Because one of the things, when I started talking about spirituality at the beginning, I talked about the fact that also issues of nature, our relationship with nature, our relationship with other things that have been created by the higher power. I mean, this particular disease is what we call a zoonosis, which is an infection that originated amongst animals that has crossed over to affect humanity.
Yes.
And part of it, although it has not been 100% proved, but what is being thought of is the practice of, eating certain wild animals. They are pointing at the pangolins, as the possible animal that one of the most traded animals, wild animals in the black market, So, so what I want to hear from you is in terms of man or humans' relationship with nature and everything that is around us, but starting from the African spirituality point of view.
Okay. All right. One of the responsibilities that we have as people that practice African spirituality, one of the responsibilities is to ensure that we don't disturb the balance of nature. Now, the balance of nature is where we're talking about plants, we're talking about animals. We need to make sure that we restore that balance. There has been areas of guidance in terms of how we can do that. And it is specific to the practitioners of African spirituality. So if, for example, let's say there is a particular plant that is popular, that is being used for healing, you make sure that you plant more of those plants to restore the what do you call it, the balance in nature. All right. Yeah. And also in terms of the biodiversity, remember there's things that depend, there's other creatures that depend on things of nature, right? Like water, that depend on things like water, that depend on the various things that we use as part of our practice of African religion and African spirituality. And so those kind of things, we do have a responsibility to make sure that we don't pollute. For example, we don't pollute the waters, because part of the ecosystem is ensuring that the waters are clean, are free of dirt, which is the pollution in the water. Things like animals, let us make sure that those that are threatened in terms of their survival, we protect those species. So things like that become our collective responsibility. Within the African spiritual belief system, we also need to listen, because I think it is important for us to know that there is one thing that we have a strength in, which we do not utilize that I think we don't utilize optimally. And that is the guidance that we get from our ancestors. They do sometimes show us things, but are we responding to what we are being told? Are we spreading the messages that we are being given? Why is it that a lot of times when you are given a message, you sift the message to suit you? So we need to be able to look at those messages for the benefit of greater humanity and for the benefit of our immediate communities as well.
Okay, all right. So, so you are of the view that even from that angle, there's change that those who believe in that area, spirituality, there is change that is required.
Yes.
Now, I talked about the issue of nature. Even the Buddhism, it has a lot of, relationship between man
and nature. And respect for nature, respect for life, really.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So now you've given us all these insights. Obviously, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, all right, so we like small kids, we've done wrong, and there's this big person up there who's not so pleased with us.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we need to have a situation where we actually go and do these things that you've been talking about.
Mhm.
So just to recap, what are the lessons just now across? What are the lessons that we have, that we should be learning at this point as humanity? Before we then get to the point of hope, because I want us to talk about hope as we wrap up with about 10 minutes to go.
Okay. The first lesson, I think, for us is a lesson of saying we need to slow down. We need to slow down. We need to reflect as humanity, as individuals, and also as communities. That's the first
Yes.
one. The second one, yes.
Yeah. I just got one quote here with me from thrivewithus.podcast.com. It's specific to COVID-19. It says, although it might be a scary time, COVID-19 has made everyone slow down and spend more time with family.
Yes.
So the theme of slowing down, it's what other people from elsewhere are actually looking at, to say humanity is being forced to slow down. Yeah, you can proceed.
So yes, slowing down is the first step. The second step, though, is that we need to not just slow down, but to reflect, use this time as an opportunity to reflect on how we've been conducting ourselves for our own selves and for the other people in our communities and societies. And also how how we relate to the world. We need to start realizing that the world is one, humanity is one. There is a reason why all of us are now on the planet at this time in the history of our host planet. And so we need to start respecting life and stop dividing. Find one another. We need to find one another as the community of the world, not just as the little communities that we have, but as the human community. We need to find one another instead of pushing one another away and realize that we are more alike than we are different. We also need to find time to redefine our relationships with ourselves and those close to us. Because maybe we've been ignoring the relationships, we haven't been taking care of those relationships. And now we have an opportunity, a forced opportunity to then say, even though we might be different, let's find things that are common. Let's get to understand one another. Let's find a way of getting the dynamics of the differences that we have as people. And let's use that as an opportunity to understand one another. And yes, it's not going to be easy because it is a scary time. Yes, I agree. However, let's look beyond that. Let's make plans of how we can change the way that we conduct ourselves beyond the now, because that also will instill the hope that you're speaking about.
So, because here, the issue about hope, I can't pronounce this name. It's Thich Nhat Hanh, something like that. It says hope is important because it can make the present moment less difficult to bear.
Yes.
If we believe that tomorrow will be better, we can bear a hardship today.
Yes.
All right.
That's
so
true.
For me, as we wrap up, it's important the issue of not just sitting. Yes, we have to do the introspection. We need to do the reflection, but we also need to instill a sense of hope.
Yes.
And if I steal from the Christian, religion, today it's Resurrection Day. All right, it's Resurrection Day, and it's about him waking up, rising, and giving us all hope that because of what he's just gone through, he's going to be our advocate next to his dad, you know, so that we can be able to correct our way. So it's about hope, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
for me, the issue of hope at this point, when humanity is suffering so many losses in terms of life, you know, and everything that we took for granted, now that we're locked down in our homes, we are actually being brought back.
And we need to be sober, we're forced to be in a sober state. So we actually are aware of are mindful of what we are doing, what changes we need to make in our lives. And just a little one about the collective consciousness and hope. Just a little on that.
Now you can go in.
All right, the age. This is something that just came to me, and I spoke about it earlier. In a different discussion. The age would stand for heightened awareness, or what we call mindfulness. Being mindful of our thoughts, our words, our deeds, and how those can either build or destroy. That's number one. Number two is the O, where we need to create an open mind and open heart. An open mind and open heart to what we know and what we do not know, because we're not certain of what's going to happen tomorrow. And so we need to look at it with that open-mindedness and an open heart to receive what is coming and find a positive way of going forward. The P is a place of peace that we need to create within, and we need to create a place of peace for others. And then the E is about empathy. We need to practice empathy for self and others, because a lot of times we want to practice empathy for others, but we don't even have empathy for ourselves. And so we need to start there. And as a way forward, whatever action plan that you put in place for a way forward for how you're going to conduct yourself, how you're going to conduct your relationships, for whatever way that you do whatever it is that you're doing, you need to bring that to the party. You need to bring that empathy, that love, that kindness, and being able to sit and listen and be able to reflect and be able to create a different way. Because if we come out of this being the same as we've been always, it's going to be a lost cause. We need to be able to take from this and say, we have shifted as humanity. We have shifted as individuals and as groups of people around the world.
Yeah. All right. So that's basically how you see things, you know. Now I'm just going to read another one by Kitty O'Mayera. And the people stayed home and read books and listened and rested and exercised and made art and played games and learned new ways of being and were still and listened more deeply. Some meditated, some prayed, some danced, some met their shadows, and the people began to think differently, and the people were healed. And in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, mindless, and heartless ways, the earth began to heal. And when the danger passed, the people joined together again. They grieved their losses and made new choices and dreamed new images and created new ways to heal the earth fully as they had been healed. So what do you make of what I've just read?
I couldn't have said it better myself, because this is something that is profound. Those words are very profound. What if there's anything I could add there, it would really water down the message there, because I think that message is strong enough as it stands on its own. It is something that we all need to take away from, from what you've just read now.
Now, I'm just going to ask you another question, because you said you are a practitioner on the African spirituality as well.
Yes.
Now, at the beginning, sometime last month, just before the lockdown,
yes,
South Africa lost Isanuse Credo Mutwa, who was about 97 years old, or
yes,
staying in Kuruman in Northern Cape.
yes.
Now, is there any significance of that, his transitioning,
To the other side.
to the other side at the time when the world and South Africa is starting to be hit by the pandemic?
You know, what's fascinating me about Ubaba Credo's passing is that everything happens for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. This is somebody that would predict a whole lot of these type of incidents, and he crosses over just before this. And so we're earning, as a country, as a continent, as the world, we're earning a guide that probably is going to help us to transition through this period to the next phase of the life of humanity. And so I believe that I can't talk about Babu Credo in 1 minute, because he's a topic on its own.
No,
and
we'll
so
have a
yes,
session about
yes,
that.
it's a very he's a gift. He's been a gift to us that we've underrated for a long time. And he is somebody that has played a big role in warning us about things. And he's been drilling a message of saying, we need to change, we need to change, we need to change. And as a person that he was, 97 years old when he passed, he was already at a level where he is beyond just being a physical human being. But he continues, I believe, on the other side to guide us and the nation.
All right. So now we will have another session about him, but I just wanted to see if from your angle, there is any, significance. So, when I was growing up, we used to listen to Michael Jackson.
Yes.
All right. And there's a song that I think it's quite appropriate at this point. His song is called Heal the World.
The world, yes.
Right? I think the world is going through a lot of,
pain and suffering.
Sickness, death, suffering, and everything like that. And, just to take one of the paragraphs here, he says, heal the world, make it a better place for you and for me and the entire human race. There are people dying. If you care enough for the living, make it a better place for you and for me. Now, I thought, in wrapping up this discussion, was we really have been looking at, from a spiritual angle, how do we look at this pandemic without pointing fingers, without looking down upon any religion or spirituality, acknowledging that majority of people in the world believe in a higher power. Obviously, there are those who don't believe in anything, but the majority of people believe in a higher power. And what I wanted to, achieve by this interview or this conversation was really to have a discussion that looks at matters of spirituality and religion across, to say what are the common themes, what are the common themes at this point in time? Yeah. What is it that maybe we are being forced as humanity to learn? It's not the first time there's a disaster, and it won't be the last time there's a disaster. However, as people who are whole, we can't just be looking only at physical, psychological, and social. The aspect of spirituality as spiritual beings has to also be taken care of. Yeah. All right. So that was the purpose of this discussion, and that's why I invited you. And so, as we close this discussion, what would you want to say as a parting shot to our viewers?
Well, thank you. As a parting shot, I would like to say that the love that we need to find for the human race is a love that needs to now be a love in action. We need to, as we go about from day to day doing whatever that we're doing to survive or to live, let us remember that there are those that wish they could have what we have. We're saying we lock down in our homes. There are people that don't even have a home. So let us be that hand that extends love to those people. Let us show care. Let us show empathy. Let us stop looking at only ourselves and our survival and look at the survival of our not only the continent as each continent, but also look at the earth as our host planet. Take care of it. Let's take care of those that are in need. Right now, there are people that a loaf of bread would make a difference to. And let us, extend a hand and help and uplift one another. Let us bring a message of hope and stop talking about doom and gloom only. Yes, there is a reality of pain, of loss, of suffering, materially and otherwise. However, I believe that there is a greater power in doing things as a collective, in unity, and in demonstrating that in action.
So those are your closing words to my viewers.
Yes.
Pelokazi, thank you very much for sharing this past hour with us. I trust that people have picked up one or two things from what we have been sharing over this past hour. Areas of spirituality, discussions around matters of spirituality or religion are always very emotive, sensitive subject. So even, having this show, I had to make sure that we don't have a situation where somebody might come later and feel that their belief system was not portrayed in a positive light. Yes. So that was not the intention. But what we also needed to do was to also talk about the reality of what some of the bad apples within each religion or spirituality normally do, which can actually taint, everything. So I want to thank you for your time, for your insights. Obviously, unlike science, where we can actually prove things in the laboratory or we can do research, matters of spirituality and religion, you can't do that. Sometimes it's about the faith, the belief. And so, but with all of that, said, I want to thank you for being brave enough to venture into a sensitive area that most people would not want to venture into. And I hope, like I said earlier, people have gained something out of the discussion. And I want to thank our viewers for their patience. We had some little technical glitches in the first 5 minutes, but all was well for the whole show. Thank you very much for being with us. And I hope you gained something out of the discussion. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you so much for having me, and a great discussion and very intimidating platform. But if there's anyone that was offended by anything that came out of this, that was not the intention. But thank you so much for this opportunity. Good night.
All right. Thank you very much. Goodbye to everybody.